I'm Kara, and welcome to Soul Inspiring Business. I believe that all of us possess unique gifts and talents that allow us to serve the world and our own growth in the highest possible way. Our lives are an expression of our thoughts, beliefs, and actions. And here, we will explore businesses, thought leaders, and topics designed to inspire, helping propel your own growth so you can live your best and most purposeful life. Welcome to Soul Inspiring Business. Welcome back to the Soul Inspiring Business Podcast. I'm your host, Kara Chafin-Donofrio. And as we close out the year 2023, and if you've been listening to us for the past few episodes, you know that we're diving into the book, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And over the last 2 episodes, we went through, so there's 4 agreements. And really this book, again, it's a very simple book with 4 agreements, very easy to follow, very easy not to follow. They're very simple ways of living your life that ultimately is meant to lead you to personal freedom, to a greater self-love, to mastery of one's self, and a more contented experience in this life. But they're also, can be challenging to live by as well. And so the first agreement that we had delved into just a few weeks ago was to be impeccable with your word. So that's the first agreement. Second agreement was do not take anything personally. And the third agreement we're talking about today is not making assumptions. And so we're going to talk about that today. I wanted to acknowledge that I've had several people reach out saying that they've really been enjoying following along with the episodes. If there's something that you'd like to share, I love to hear feedback from you all, and would love to hear how this might be unfolding for you. It sounds like some of you have had some type of experience with the book before, which is great. And as I mentioned in, I think, one of the last episodes, this book for me, it's one of those books that you can read and reread. It's a very simple book, not a whole lot of pages. And so it's a quick and easy read. And it's one of those books that you can just read over and over and get something different each time. And it's also just good reminders. Like every year, I think it's a good idea to revisit this book and revisit the principles that it teaches, because really when you can live your life in that way, when you can be impeccable with your word and really make conscious choices about how you're speaking to others and how you're speaking to yourself, when you can not take anything personally and really live in your own truth and not need the approval of others to sway your day, into these emotional roller coasters of feeling good or bad just by what another person has said, right? And then when today we're talking about not making assumptions. So gosh, we think about the assumptions that we make all the time. The world would be a much happier place if we just could learn this, right? Learn how to not make assumptions. Because the problem is when we make assumptions, we believe them. We believe them as truth. And when we make assumptions about what others are doing or what others are thinking, we take it personally. We may blame somebody for the assumption that we've made, and then we may give them back emotional poison in our word, right? So then we've not followed the 3 agreements, 3 of the first agreements. And so that's why when we make assumptions, we're just asking for trouble, right? And we see this unfold in so many different ways in the world. We make assumptions in our partnerships and with our significant others. We make assumptions in our friendships. We make assumptions in businesses and with our team, and assuming what somebody else wants or needs based on our own needs. And especially, we see this unfolding with people that we're really close to. So if, I say, well, my husband should do X, Y, and Z because he knows me and he should know that this is going to make me happy. Well, should he? Right? Like, how is he supposed to know that? And so, again, we kind of make assumptions. And if he doesn't respond in a way that I deem that he knows what I want. And if he doesn't respond in that way, then I react and get upset and mad. And then we've created this whole drama, and it's all created by us. And we make these assumptions because all of us live in our own reality, really. We all have different ways that we grew up thinking about the world, and even thinking about your siblings, if you have them, or people that grew up in your family. Each of you are very different, and each of you has different life experiences that have affected how you view the world. Or each of us are built differently. We like different things. We have different interests. And so, even if we're talking about from a business relationship, think about how if you were to structure with your team a compensation model because you think that person wants to be rewarded by monetarily, but they actually just want to be acknowledged, well, then you've missed, and then there's something missing on their end because they don't feel valued, and you think they feel valued because you gave them a raise, and they don't feel valued because all they needed was for you to hear that they were valued, right? And so all of us have these different experiences that we grow up with shaping our life. Interesting sidebar. I recently heard, I believe it was a podcast, and they were talking about parents and siblings and their kids, being how each kid is so different. And they were talking about, well, the parent was saying, well, gosh, I don't understand. It was the same parent. How do these kids, how are they so different? And what they were saying is actually they weren't raised by the same parent, because you were different when you were raising them at their different points of their life, right? So if, for example, I think about it with my own kids, I'm a different parent than I was with my first child than I am with my third child, because I'm wiser. I have different life experiences. And quite frankly, my business has evolved differently. So I had more time with some of my kids than others when they were younger. And so you parent differently. And so again, likewise, that's just each of us comes at life with growing up, even in the same household, with a different life experience. And so our needs, desires, beliefs about what we think is possible are very different. So how do we know? How do we not make assumptions, right? It's really about having the courage to ask questions, to stay curious enough to really give the other person presence, and ask questions about what it is that other person needs, wants, until you're super, super clear. Now, it's interesting on the real estate side. I'll never forget, in my first job, I worked in new home sales, and our manager was talking about, never making assumptions about what our clients wanted and what might be. So we were selling a new community, and he was telling the story of, there was this one lot that backed to a cemetery. And so everybody was thinking, oh gosh, this is the worst lot. Nobody's going to want this. And somebody came in to this model home and said, oh my gosh, you have a lot backing to a cemetery. This reminds me of my grandmother's home, and that's where I want to live because I've got so much nostalgia because her home backed to a cemetery. I mean, again, not making assumptions on what you think is good for someone else, and really being curious enough to have the conversation and to say, what is it that you like? What are the things that would be most important to you in a home or with whatever you're selling or whatever conversation you're having, right? So having the courage to stay curious in conversation. And I think the other thing that happens in conversation is that sometimes we don't go far enough in conversation. So maybe we ask one question and then we think we have all the answers, or we think we know based on what that person has said. We think we have an understanding of what they want. But often it requires another clarifying question and another question and another question to really get to the need behind that need, right? And really understand what it is that that person is reacting to. And so again, it's a valuable lesson, I think, in any business relationship or partnership, especially in leading team, in really understanding your team members and what's important to them. One of my favorite books, it's called The Dream Manager. I'll tag it in the show notes, but it really talks about how this manager basically got to the heart of what it is that each of his employees wanted, their dreams or goals, and kind of helped them work through that. And each person had a different goal, and so how did you help? And he helped transform the lives of his employees just by taking time to really get to the heart of what it was that was most important to that person, whether it was home ownership, whether it was putting their kids through college, whether it was a dream vacation, but really getting to the heart of what it is of the people that you lead so that you have a good understanding of how to best support them and help them. And the same goes with client relationships, getting to the heart and asking not just one question, but several questions. And even I think what's really powerful in when you're doing this exercise of asking questions is then really acknowledging what you heard, because sometimes we think we hear the right thing and saying, listen, what I'm hearing you say is XYZ, and that's what I got out of what you said. Is that accurate, or is there anything I missed? Or, and so it's really just engaging in really quality conversations and having courage to ask questions. And on the personal side in relationships, I think this goes the same way. Having the courage to sit down with your partner or with your significant other and say, this is what I need to feel more fulfilled. This is what I need from you, and everybody, all of us have the right to ask for what we want. Now, the other person has the absolute right to say no or to say yes. So our responsibility is to ask for what we want. And the other person's responsibility is to say whether that's something they're willing to do or not do. And then the responsibility goes back to us to say whether that's something we can live with or not live with, right? So you can see how really having pure conversation is really kind of at the heart of this agreement. And I think the other thing that's really interesting about this one too, which we may not always think about, but is really the assumptions we make about ourselves. Because, oh gosh, there was some study, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it studied how many thoughts we thought a day. I think it was something like the average person thinks 10,000 thoughts a day. And I believe that in this study, it came out that roughly 70 to 80% of the thoughts were negative. So if we're thinking 10,000 thoughts a day and 7,000 to 8,000 of those thoughts are negative, then no wonder so many of us are walking around thinking, I can't do this, or this is hard, or how am I going to do this, or living in fear or anxiety, right? Because our minds are just naturally wired to think negatively. So same thing with when we make assumptions about ourselves, we may think, what if we think, I think I can do this. And then we don't do it for whatever reason. And then we go into this whole mindset of we're not good enough. We go into this whole story. We start to, again, going to the being impeccable with our word. It's not just about what we're saying to others, but what we're telling ourselves. So how often do we make assumptions for ourselves? Like, oh, if I can do this, but when we don't, and then we go into this whole story about how we are not good enough, we can't do it. Why does somebody else get this? All the drama that we create for ourselves. When maybe what we can stop and do is be honest with ourselves and have some good questions that we can ask ourselves. Okay, well, what will I need to change? If I want to do this, if this is the goal, let's be honest with yourself about whether that's a realistic goal. And if it is, then be honest with yourself about what needs to happen in order for that goal to occur. So if you want to create a certain amount of income, or you want to make a career change, what are the things that might have to happen in order for you to make that work? And so then starting to kind of use that as a way to not only, to question yourself, right? So ask good questions and have those conversations with self so that you can determine if that's realistic or how you're going to make that happen versus just judging yourself for maybe not getting it right away, right? And so in any kind of relationship, I think that we can really practice this. And in the book, it talks about, we make the assumption that everyone sees life the way we do. We assume that others think the way we do, feel the way we feel, judge the way we judge, and abuse the way we abuse. So, knowing this, I think that's why so many of us have a fear about others. We make all these assumptions, but let's commit going into the year 2024 that we're going to let that go. Let's commit to not needing to make assumptions or not making assumptions. Because if we can communicate in a way where we're not making assumptions, we're asking clearly what we want, then we become more impeccable with our word. We are not taking things personally. So you can see how all of these kind of flow together. And so I think one of the other things with this is just awareness. I think half of the first step when we start really living these principles out is becoming aware of them, becoming aware of when we are making assumptions. Because when we have awareness, we can actually make and choose different action. And that's really what makes the difference. We go from creating this, in some ways, we can create this own personal hell just by, making assumptions of ourselves and others, of taking things personally, of then being harsh with ourselves. And so when we can turn that and we can say, you know what, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We are going to use words for creation. We are going to give and share and be loving. And, these just become a way of life. And when you transform that dream, magic happens. And to quote Don Miguel Ruiz, when you transform your whole dream, magic just happens in your life. What you need comes to you easily because spirit moves freely through you. And this is the mastery of intent. It's the mastery of the spirit, the mastery of love, the mastery of gratitude, and the mastery of life. And this is the path to personal freedom. So I think just like anything, these are, if you're just getting accustomed to these agreements, they are new habits, right? And so we're just learning a new way of being. We're learning a new way of seeing the world. And when you step into that, it starts with awareness of, oh yeah, maybe I did make an assumption. Maybe I should ask another question and make sure that I'm really clear on what it is that person really needs or wants. Or maybe I'm judging myself too much right now. How can I shift that? How can I start to make new habits? Because as these become, you take action that is more in integrity, that's more out of love for self and for others. these agreements become more second nature and it becomes a way of being. And I think that's really the intention when we talk about these 4 agreements being a personal path to freedom. It doesn't mean you're going to be perfect every day, but it means that we have now an awareness and a framework for how can we create more intentionally? How can we create from a purer place? And how can we give others the gift of non-judgment? And it also allows us to get deeper in our relationships because the more we learn about others, those relationships get deeper. And as those people, hopefully as they learn these agreements too, and their world gets better and we all shift into a more awakened place where we can, again, I don't think that we always have the right to ask for what we want. And somebody always has a right to say yes or no, right? And so we can live in more integrity as we move forward in our path into 2024. That's the intention. And I'd love to hear from you if something with this resonated and hear your thoughts. And I am wishing you a beautiful day. Remember, the first 3 agreements we've reviewed so far, which is to be impeccable with your word, to not take things personally. And today we talked about not making assumptions. So, especially around the holidays, this is a good time to practice all these as we're going into a lot of relationships that have many patterns that have been happening for many decades and years. And maybe it's an opportunity that we can shift that into something greater. So sending you lots of love today, and until next time. Loved being here with you today and would love to connect with you more over on Instagram. My handle is linked to the show notes, or you can just type in @KaraChafinDonofrio. And I have something special for you as a free gift, my Dynamic Life Journal. This special book has the power to really help you live a soul-inspired life. Go to freegiftfromkara.com. Easy to remember, freegiftfromkara.com. Until next time, beautiful people, sending all my love.